The ship known as Harmonious Unity floated quietly in the stars. It was a big and beautiful vessel, home to the Galactic Concordat. Today, important aliens from 37 different worlds gathered inside for a special meeting. Park Han-Sol stood at his station on the bridge, monitoring the ship's systems. As a human observer to the Concordat, he wasn't allowed to speak at meetings, but his technical skills had earned him respect. The blue lights of his console reflected on his face as he frowned at some unusual readings. "Something's wrong," he muttered to himself. At that exact moment, the ship jerked violently. The lights flickered, and then emergency red beams cut through the sudden darkness. A low alarm began to sound throughout the ship. In the grand meeting hall, the alien delegates looked up in confusion. Some had many eyes, others had none at all. Some floated in the air, while others needed special suits to breathe. All of them turned to Captain Lee, the tall, thin alien in charge of the ship. "Please remain calm," Captain Lee said, his translator making his clicks and whistles into words everyone could understand. "We are experiencing a technical difficulty." The ship shook again, harder this time. A small alien with purple skin and 4 arms grabbed onto the table to keep from falling. Chief Engineer Dong rushed into the room. Her silver skin reflected the emergency lights as she whispered urgently to Captain Lee. Their conversation was quiet, but Han-Sol could see from across the room that something was very wrong. "Attention, everyone," Captain Lee finally announced. "We have suffered a serious malfunction in our main propulsion system. The quantum flux regulator has failed." A worried murmur spread through the crowd. Even Han-Sol knew what that meant. Without the regulator, the ship couldn't move properly. It was like a car without brakes drifting wherever space took it. "Can it be fixed?" asked one of the delegates, a tall being made mostly of what looked like crystal. Engineer Dong shook her head. "The damage is extensive. We would need a special facility to repair such a delicate component." Han-Sol checked his instruments again and felt his stomach drop. "Captain," he called out, breaking protocol by speaking during the meeting, "we're drifting toward the neutron star." All eyes turned to the main view screen. In the distance, a tiny but intensely bright light shone. It was a neutron star, the collapsed core of a dead sun, so dense that a spoonful would weigh billions of tons on Earth. And it was pulling them closer. "How long do we have?" Captain Lee asked. "At current drift speed, approximately 5 hours and 27 minutes before radiation reaches dangerous levels," Han-Sol replied, checking his calculations twice. Another engineer, Min, the ship's most respected technical expert, stepped forward. Her 8 tentacles moved quickly over a portable computer. "I confirm these calculations," she said gravely. "And I regret to inform the Council that our escape pods cannot accommodate all delegates and crew." The room erupted in frightened voices. Some delegates demanded priority evacuation. Others suggested sending distress signals. A few simply sat in shocked silence. "We will not abandon anyone," Captain Lee declared firmly. "We must find a solution." For the next hour, the ship's best technical minds gathered in the engine room. Han-Sol watched from the side as they examined the damaged regulator, a complex device that looked like a glass cube filled with swirling lights. Now those lights flickered weakly, some sections completely dark. Min, with her decades of experience, finally stepped back from the device. "It cannot be repaired with our available tools and materials. The internal matrix has collapsed. Even if we had the parts, it would take days of careful work." "Days we do not have," Engineer Dong added quietly. Han-Sol looked at the damaged device. Back on Earth, he had been a mechanic who fixed old cars and machines. This alien technology was far more advanced, but problems were problems. Still, he knew better than to suggest anything. These engineers were the best in the galaxy. "Captain," Lee ordered a distress signal sent on all frequencies. "Perhaps someone nearby will hear us." As the hours passed, the neutron star grew larger on the view screen. The radiation levels began to climb slowly. The delegates were moved to the center of the ship where the shielding was strongest. Han-Sol kept working at his station, monitoring their drift and the radiation. He couldn't help but think there might be another way to approach the problem. Not fixing the regulator itself, but maybe bypassing it somehow? On Earth, he'd often found creative solutions when proper parts weren't available. But who would listen to a human with primitive knowledge? These aliens had been traveling the stars for thousands of years before humans even invented electricity. Just as hope seemed lost, the communications officer suddenly straightened. "Captain, we're receiving a response to our distress call on..." The view screen appeared a small ship, humble compared to the mighty Harmonious Unity. It was an old human trading vessel called the Blue Sky. "This is Captain Kim of the Blue Sky," came a woman's voice. "We received your distress call. How can we help? Please include proper citations for any information you provide that is not general knowledge, using the citation instructions provided." The faces of the alien council members showed different emotions as they stared at the small human ship on the view screen. Some looked hopeful, others doubtful. "Captain." Lee stepped forward to address the human captain. "This is Captain Lee of the Galactic Concordate vessel, Harmonious Unity. We appreciate your response, Captain Kim, but our situation is grave. Our quantum flux regulator has failed, and we are drifting toward a neutron star." On the screen, Captain Kim nodded. She was a woman with short black hair and calm eyes. "We understand the danger. Our ship's mechanic might be able to help. He has solved many difficult problems before." Engineer Min moved closer to Captain Lee and spoke quietly. "Captain, with respect, human technology is far behind ours. What could they possibly do that our best engineers cannot?" Captain Lee considered this but replied, "We have few options left. We should accept any help offered." The Blue Sky moved carefully alongside the much larger diplomatic vessel. Soon, a small shuttle connected the two ships. The airlock doors opened and two humans stepped onto the Harmonious Unity. Captain Kim wore a simple blue uniform with patches showing her travels across space. But it was the man behind her who caught everyone's attention. He was older, with gray hair and wrinkled hands. He carried an old metal toolbox and wore clothes stained with oil and grease. His name was Choi Han-sol, watched with interest as the humans were brought to the bridge. He rarely saw other humans this far from Earth. Captain Lee greeted them formally. "Welcome aboard. This is our Chief Engineer Dong and Technical Director Min, our finest experts." Choi nodded politely but said little. His eyes moved around the bridge, taking in the advanced technology. "May I see the problem?" he finally asked. The aliens exchanged glances. Technical Director Min's tentacles curled slightly in what Han-sol knew was a sign of doubt. "This way," Engineer Dong said, leading the group toward the engine room. The engine room was huge, filled with glowing equipment and humming machines. In the center sat the damaged quantum flux regulator, its glass case now dark in many places. Choi approached it slowly. He set down his toolbox and carefully walked around the device, studying it from all angles. The alien engineers watched with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "The internal matrix has collapsed," explained Min. "The quantum fields cannot be stabilized without completely rebuilding the core, which would take days in a proper facility." Choi nodded, still looking at the device. He pulled a small tool from his pocket, a simple scanner that humans used. The aliens almost laughed at such primitive technology. "May I open it?" he asked. Engineer Dong hesitated but then nodded. "It cannot be damaged further than it already is." Choi carefully removed the outer casing. Inside was a complex array of crystals, wires, and small devices that glowed with faint light. He studied it silently, occasionally touching different components. "How long have we been drifting?" Captain Kim asked. 3 hours and 12 minutes, Han-sol replied from his station. "We have approximately 2 hours before radiation reaches dangerous levels." Choi finally spoke. "The regulator itself cannot be fixed without parts you don't have. But maybe we don't need to fix it. Maybe we can work around it." Technical Director Min's tentacles waved in disagreement. "Impossible. The quantum field must be stabilized or the engines cannot function safely." "On Earth," Choi said quietly, We often don't have the right parts. We learn to make do with what we have. This is not some primitive Earth machine, Min replied. This is advanced technology developed over thousands of years. Choi smiled slightly. Sometimes old problems need new eyes, or maybe new problems need old eyes. May I try something? Captain Lee looked at the view screen showing the neutron star growing larger. We have little to lose. You have permission to try. I'll need a workspace and access to your spare parts, Choi said. Engineer Dong pointed to a nearby workbench. You can use this area. What parts do you need? I'm not sure yet, Choi answered honestly. I'll know when I see them. This answer did not inspire confidence in the alien engineers. They exchanged looks that clearly showed their doubts. But Captain Lee nodded, and Engineer Dong led Choi to the storage areas where spare parts were kept. Han Sol watched as the human mechanic began examining different components, setting some aside while returning others to their places. Choi didn't seem to follow any pattern the aliens could recognize. He picked up cooling pipes, power conduits, and communication devices, parts that had nothing to do with quantum field regulation. What is he doing? Engineer Min asked Captain Kim quietly. Choi has his own way of solving problems, Captain Kim replied. He sees connections others miss. As time passed, the radiation warnings became more frequent. The neutron star's pull grew stronger. Many of the alien delegates gathered in the observation room, watching the approaching danger with growing fear. Choi worked steadily, his weathered hands moving with surprising gentleness over the alien technology. He occasionally asked Han Sol questions about the ship's systems, seeming to value the younger human's input. Can this really work? Han Sol asked quietly, watching Choi connect parts that were never designed to work together. Choi looked up with calm eyes. We won't know until we try. But sometimes the best solutions aren't in any manual. Outside the ship, the neutron star waited, its incredible gravity pulling them closer with each passing minute. As Choi worked, a small crowd of alien engineers gathered to watch. They whispered among themselves, their doubt clear in their many eyes and gestures. The human mechanic paid them no attention. He sat on the floor surrounded by parts that seemed random to everyone else. What exactly are you trying to build? Engineer Dong finally asked. Her silver skin reflected the emergency lights as she bent down to examine Choi's work. A bypass, Choi said simply. He held up what looked like a cooling pipe from the food storage system. This will help channel the energy flow. Technical Director Min moved forward, her 8 tentacles waving in what Han Sol recognized as frustration. That is impossible. That pipe is designed for liquid coolant, not quantum energy. Fields, Choi nodded. Yes, but its inner lining contains metals that can conduct energy if modified correctly. He pulled a small laser cutter from his toolbox and began carefully changing the pipe's structure. This violates every principle of quantum engineering, Min said, her voice rising. Energy fields cannot be channeled through such crude materials. With respect, Choi replied without looking up. Principles are just our best understanding at the time. Sometimes we need to look beyond them. Captain Lee entered the engine room with Captain Kim. How is the progress? He asked. Before Minnie could speak, Choi answered. I need about 20 more minutes. The radiation levels are rising faster than expected, Captain Lee said. We have less than an hour before critical exposure begins. Choi nodded and worked faster. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who had fixed thousands of machines before. From his toolbox, he pulled out simple earth tools, wrenches, pliers, and electrical tape. The alien engineers looked at these primitive tools with disbelief. He cannot possibly fix advanced quantum technology with those, Min whispered to Engineer Dong. Han Sol moved closer to watch Choi work. The older man had created something strange. A collection of cooling pipes connected to power conduits, with communication relays attached at odd angles. Small parts from his own toolkit were integrated into the design. It looked messy and random. Nothing like the clean, elegant technology the aliens used. What made you think of this approach? Han Sol asked quietly. Choi connected 2 wires before, answering. Back on Earth, I fixed old fishing boats. One day during a storm, a boat's engine died miles from shore. I couldn't fix the broken part, but I found a way to redirect the power through the cooling system. Not perfect, but it got the fishermen home safely. But this is much more complex than a boat engine, Hansol said. Choi smiled. The principles are often the same. Energy needs a path. If the normal path is broken, we make a new one. An alarm sounded throughout the ship. The voice of the navigation officer came over the speakers. Warning, radiation levels increasing. All personnel move to inner chambers for maximum protection. The alien delegates began moving deeper into the ship. Some looked back at the engine room, their faces showing fear and lost hope. We should evacuate the most important delegates, Min suggested to Captain Lee. The escape pods could save some of us. Captain Lee looked troubled but shook his head. We stay together. All lives here are equally valuable. Choi continued working, now attaching his strange device to the ship's main power system. Engineer, Dong watched with growing curiosity rather than skepticism. The approach is unusual, she admitted. But I see what you're attempting. You're trying to create an alternative stabilization field. Exactly, Choi said. If we can't fix the regulator, we work around it. He pulled a small crystal from his pocket, a simple earth quartz that glowed slightly in his palm. This isn't as advanced as your crystals, but it can help focus the energy. Min's tentacles curled in surprise. You're using a primitive earth mineral as a focusing crystal? That cannot possibly handle the energy flow. It doesn't need to handle all of it, Choi explained patiently. Just enough to create a stable pattern that your remaining systems can recognize and build on. The ship shuddered as it moved closer to the neutron star. The metal walls creaked under the increasing gravitational stress. Time was running out. Choi made his final connections, joining his improvised bypass to the damaged quantum flux regulator. The device looked nothing like proper alien technology. It was a mix of different parts held together with clamps and even some of the electrical tape from his toolkit. This goes against everything we know about quantum field manipulation, Min said, watching with a mixture of fascination and horror. Sometimes that's exactly what's needed, Choi replied. He looked up at Captain Lee. I'm ready to test it. The alien captain looked at the strange device, then at the view screen showing the growing neutron star. Proceed. Choi nodded to Hansol. I could use your help. When I give the signal, route power through Junction 7. Hansol moved to the control panel, his hands hovering over the buttons. Everyone in the engine room held their breath. Semeyer, ship's creaking grew louder as the neutron star's pull strengthened. Now, Choi said quietly. Hansol pressed the sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lights flickered, and a low hum filled the room. The bypass device vibrated slightly, and the cooling pipes glowed with energy they were never designed to carry. Everyone watched the main status panel. The indicators remained red. It's not working, Min said. Choi adjusted something on his device. Give it a moment. The hum grew louder. The improvised focusing crystal began to glow brighter. And then, slowly, the first status indicator changed, from red to yellow. The engine room fell silent as everyone watched the status panel. The yellow light flickered, struggling between red and yellow. Choi's hands moved quickly, adjusting connections on his strange device. Sweat ran down his face as he worked. The quantum field is trying to stabilize, Engineer Dong said, her voice filled with surprise. But it's still unstable. Choi nodded without looking up. Need to balance the flow better. He reached into his toolkit and pulled out a small metal object. It looked like a simple valve from an earth machine. What is that? Min asked, her tentacles moving closer to. Examine it. Flow regulator from an old tractor, Choi explained. Not made for quantum fields, but the principle is the same. Control the flow rate. He carefully attached it to one of the cooling pipes. The yellow light on the status panel steadied, no longer flickering back to red. It's working, Hansol said, watching the readings on his console. The field is growing stronger. Throughout the ship, the delegates felt the subtle change. The constant creaking of the hull quieted slightly. Captain Lee received reports from different sections. The gravitational pull is still increasing, but at a slower rate, the navigation officer reported. We're still moving toward the neutron star, but not as quickly. Choi made another adjustment to his bypass. The ship's main lights flickered, then grew stronger. A second indicator on the status panel changed from red to yellow. Route more power to the forward stabilizers, Choi instructed Hansol. Hansol quickly adjusted the controls. Power redirected. The bypass device hummed louder. The Earth crystal at its center glowed brightly, pulsing with energy. Some of the alien engineers stepped back, worried it might explode. The crystal shouldn't be able to handle that much energy, Min said, her voice tense. It doesn't need to handle it for long, Choi replied. Just long enough to establish the pattern. The ship shuddered again, but differently this time. It wasn't the pull of the neutron star. It was the engines trying to restart. The main propulsion system, silent for hours, began to make a low, rumbling sound. Captain Lee's voice came over the speakers. Engine room, status report. The bypass is working, Engineer Dong answered, her silver skin reflecting the now pulsing lights of the engine core. The quantum field is beginning to stabilize. On the bridge, the navigation officer called out, Captain, our drift toward the star is slowing. Every alien on the ship felt a surge of hope. In the engine room, Choi worked with calm focus, making small adjustments to his device. The third indicator on the status panel changed to yellow, then a moment later to green. How is this possible? Min whispered, watching the readouts. The quantum field should not respond to such primitive methods. Sometimes the universe doesn't care about what should or shouldn't work, Choi said. It only cares about what does work. The ship's engines grew louder. The fourth indicator turned green. Then the fifth. The main engine core, dark since the malfunction began, started to glow with blue light. Propulsion at 20%. Hansol reported. 30%. 40%. A cheer went up from the alien engineers as they watched the impossible happen. Choi's strange collection of mismatched parts was actually working, creating a stable quantum field that the engines could use. Propulsion at 60%, Hansol continued. That's enough power to move us away from the neutron star. Captain Lee's voice came again. Engine room, you have done the impossible. Engage thrusters and set course away from the star. Hansol pressed the controls. The ship trembled, then began to move. On the view screen, the neutron star stopped growing larger and began to shrink as the harmonious unity pulled away. In the observation room, the delegates cheered and embraced each other with various appendages. Some with religious beliefs offered prayers of thanks. Others simply stared in awe as they moved away from certain death. Choi sat back, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked tired but satisfied. Engineer Dong approached him with a new respect in her eyes. How did you know this would work? She asked. Choi shrugged. I didn't know for certain, but I've found that energy always wants to flow somewhere. Our job is just to give it the right path. Min floated closer, her tentacles now relaxed. But this contradicts everything we know about quantum field theory. By all our understanding, this should not function. Maybe your understanding needs updating, Choi suggested gently. The universe is always teaching us new things if we're willing to learn. Captain Kim entered the engine room, smiling at her mechanic. How long did it take you to fix it? Hansol checked the ship's log. 28 minutes from when he first started connecting the bypass. 28 minutes. Less than half an hour to solve a problem that the galaxy's best engineers had declared impossible. The aliens looked at the human mechanic with new eyes. Captain Lee's voice announced throughout the ship. We are now at safe distance from the neutron star. Radiation levels are returning to normal. All delegates may return to their quarters. As the crisis ended, Choi began carefully securing his bypass device. This is temporary, he explained. It will hold for a while, but you should get to a proper repair facility as soon as possible. Engineer Dong nodded. We will. But without your solution, there would be no ship left to repair. Choi packed his tools back into his old metal box. He didn't speak of his achievement or seek praise. He simply did what needed to be done, the way humans had always done throughout their history. Hansel watched the older human with newfound respect. Perhaps humanity had more to offer the galaxy than anyone had realized. 3 days after the near disaster, the Harmonious Unity reached Starbase 7, a huge space station where proper repairs could be made. All 37 delegates had gathered in the grand meeting hall. Today they weren't discussing trade agreements or border disputes. Today they were talking about humans. Choi stood uncomfortably in the center of the room. He wore his usual work clothes, stained with oil and marked by years of repairs. Next to the elegant robes and natural splendor of the alien delegates, he looked very plain. But every eye in the room was fixed on him. Captain Lee spoke first. The Galactic Concordat owes a great debt to Mechanic Choi of Earth. Using nothing but spare parts and simple tools, he created a solution our best engineers thought impossible. He saved this ship and everyone aboard. The delegates applauded in various ways. Some clapped their hands or tentacles, others flashed colors or made musical sounds. Choi looked down at his boots, clearly not used to such attention. "I would like to understand," said Counselor Tark, the crystal being who had spoken during the crisis. "How did you solve a quantum engineering problem without advanced training?" Choi looked up, thinking about his answer. "On Earth, I fix old machines, tractors, boats, cars. When parts break and you can't get new ones, you learn to be creative. But our engineers have centuries of knowledge," another delegate said. "How could you succeed where they failed?" "Sometimes too much knowledge can be a problem," Choi replied. "You believe something can't be done because that's what you were taught. I didn't know it was supposed to be impossible." Technical Director Min floated forward. In the days since the crisis, she had spent many hours studying Choi's bypass device. Her tentacles moved in a pattern that showed respect. "The human's approach ignored our established theories," she explained to the council. "Instead of trying to recreate the quantum field exactly as our designs specify, he created an alternative pathway that achieved similar results through entirely different means." Engineer Dong added, "It's like, if you cannot cross a river by bridge, you build a boat instead." The delegates murmured among themselves. A tall blue alien stood up. "The Galactic Engineering Academy would be honored if Mechanic Choi would share his methods with our students." Choi looked surprised. "I'm not a teacher, I just fix things." "Perhaps that is exactly what we need to learn," the blue alien replied. Captain Kim, who stood near Choi, smiled proudly. "The Blue Sky is scheduled to return to Earth Sector in 2 weeks. Choi could stay until then." The council voted unanimously to invite Choi to teach at the academy. For the next 2 weeks, the best engineering minds in the galaxy came to learn from a simple human mechanic. In the academy's main hall, Choi stood before a group of alien engineers. Instead of using the advanced holographic system, he had asked for simple tools and parts to demonstrate his methods. "The problem with your quantum theory," he explained as he connected 2 seemingly incompatible parts, "is that you see barriers between systems. But energy doesn't care about your categories. It flows where it can flow." He showed them how to look beyond the intended purpose of a part to see its basic properties, how to combine different systems in new ways, how sometimes the solution wasn't to fix the broken part, but to create a different path around it. Some of the older engineers struggled with these ideas, but the younger ones watched with growing excitement, seeing possibilities they had never considered before. Meanwhile, news of what happened on the Harmonious Unity spread throughout the galaxy. Other species began looking at humans differently. They had seen humans as newcomers with primitive technology. Now they wondered what other insights these adaptable beings might offer. On the final day before the Blue Sky departed, a formal ceremony was held. The Galactic Concordat presented Choi with its highest honor for scientific achievement. The simple mechanic looked embarrassed as they placed the glowing medal around his neck. "I don't need awards," he told Captain Kim later as they walked back to their ship. "I just did what needed doing." "I know," she replied. "But you've changed how they see us. Before they thought humans were just catching up to their technology. Now they see we have something valuable to teach them too." As the blue sky prepared to leave, Technical Director Min came to say goodbye. Her tentacles formed the pattern for deep respect. Our engineers have begun studying Earth's history, she told Choi. We're particularly interested in how humans developed such creative problem-solving skills. That's simple, Choi said with a smile. We had to. On Earth, we never had enough of anything. When you can't get what you need, you learn to make do with what you have. Min's color changed to indicate understanding. We developed our technology during times of plenty. Perhaps that limited our thinking in ways we didn't realize. As the blue sky pulled away from the station, many aliens watched it go. The small, ordinary-looking ship carried something precious, a reminder that sometimes the greatest innovations come not from advanced technology, but from the determined creativity that develops in the face of limitations. Within a year, the Galactic Concordat established a new research division focused on adaptive engineering, the art of solving problems with limited resources. And at every major shipyard across the galaxy, engineers began seeking human mechanics to join their teams. The universe had taken notice of humanity in a new way, not for their weapons or their speed of advancement, but for their unique ability to look at the impossible and say, "Let me try anyway."